What is going on, everybody? Thank you all so much for tuning into this live stream segment of Mikasa Sukasa. And of course, as always, I am your humble host, Niko House. I want to give a special shout out, as usual, to our patrons at Patreon. You can join our Patreon by going to www.patreon.com/Mikasa Sukasa. Help support the show and help support the network and help us continue to grow. Also, as usual, I want to give a special shout out to American Freedom Radio. You can listen to us live right now on American Freedom Radio at AmericanFreedomRadio.com. Make sure you follow them on Twitter and on Facebook as well, and of course on YouTube. Also, make sure that you subscribe to us on Roku. We are the first independent news network on Roku, so go subscribe. Make sure you rank us 5 stars. So that way we can continue to grow. Right now, we're technically the most popular news network on Roku. With that being said, it's a very small sample size. So, but we're tugging along, and we hope to continue to grow there, as you all have helped us continue to grow here on YouTube and on Facebook and on Twitter. So, wow, yesterday was a doozy, right? We had a lot of different, instances of election integrity, election fraud. I witnessed some myself. I actually had Brenda Snipes called on me because when they were trying to kick myself and my partner Suzanne out of the polling station because we were watching a woman take ballots from the floor while somebody was trying to pack them up and just put them neatly in a stack and wasn't doing anything with them. She just randomly just took them out, took the ballots out of a stack on the floor and put them in another random stack that she was organizing. And she got uncomfortable by us looking at her while she was doing it, and they called Brenda Snipes and threatened to call the cops. We weren't doing anything but standing there. They said we were in the way, even though we were in the middle of a big gym. So that was just one instance. There's another instance that I'm going to show you all in a little bit, and for the people listening on the radio, I'll describe it to you. But it was one of Tim Canova's volunteers actually figured out that people were using personal vehicles to transport ballots from other locations and load them into a moving truck. And each person in the vehicles were by themselves, which is illegal. You're not supposed. It's illegal and unethical. So it was a lot of that. Numbers, simple mathematics and analytics did not really add up when you're talking about the Tim Canova race specifically. You got the Beto O'Rourke race against Ted Cruz, where they say they suspect, along with Stacey Abrams, they suspect there was widespread election fraud, but because Beto O'Rourke is controlled by his puppet masters, and I keep telling y'all need to remember that, unfortunately, they were not able to do anything about it. Because, well, let's be very clear, the people who own these machines are the same people who donate to these candidates, and these are the puppet masters. So you can only expect a puppet to do so much in that situation. I mean, what are the Democrats going to say? Are they going to complain about election fraud? I mean, they'll let the news do it, but the Democrats themselves won't do it because they know at some point in the near future or in the later future, they will probably be the beneficiary of election fraud in some way, form, or fashion if they continue to play ball like they are told. So in situations like with Beto O'Rourke, you notice he didn't say anything about election fraud. And that's happened across the country, where you see these Democrats who are supposed to be progressive allowing our votes and our voices to be stolen. Tim Canova obviously being one of the few candidates across the country that made election integrity a pillar of his campaign. Marsha Squire for Michigan, she was running for the Senate, U.S. Senate. She's another one. Kenneth Mejia, another one. Maria Estrada, of course. So you have a number of candidates across the country who do want to tackle election fraud, but the ones who are getting a lot of the love, who are the quote-unquote rising stars in the Democratic Party, have not been addressing election fraud, and it's because, well, at some point, they probably benefited from it. I don't believe that Beto O'Rourke actually beat Sema Hernandez, which is his progressive opponent. I believe, personally, that he probably cheated. And what is he going to say? Because when they investigate an election and they find some wrongdoing with that machine, these are the same machines that were being used once again during the primary, which he knows he probably benefited from some fraud. These machines have to go. We should be doing 100% hand counted paper ballots, and we should be doing automatic recounts, but we're not there yet, and there's no reason why we shouldn't be there. But you know, that's what we're dealing with right now. So I want to go ahead and get started. Remember, if you're on YouTube and you're listening or you're watching, you can donate a super chat, and we will read your comment aloud, which will be heard on YouTube, American Freedom Radio, Roku, and our playback later. And so there was a weird situation yesterday. So I was gone for a few days because I was helping out with the Tim Canova campaign. I'm sure a lot of you all saw my shirts. It was a great time. Tim's upset, but we haven't given up, and that's something we're going to discuss in a little bit. But while I was volunteering, I met a lot of people, by the way, that were like either in our Truth Bomb activist group on Facebook, and a lot of people who are fans on YouTube. Shout out to you guys. I was glad to finally meet you. I'm glad we all got to take pictures together. That was a good time. We got to celebrate the success of Tim, and he may not have won the election by the establishment standards, but he did reveal a lot of truth in just how corrupt our system is. So I just want to give a quick shout out to them and have fun celebrating with you guys there. But we had one of our volunteers for the Tim Canova campaign get some footage. I'm going to have the people on YouTube, I'm going to have you watch the footage. And then on the radio, I'll go ahead and describe to you what's going on. 1 second.
So I'm not real sure what's going on here, but they're like driving up with the cars. Let me flip this. And then putting everything in the truck. Oh, let me move my hand here. Hang on, guys. And then, I know it's dark and it's hard to see. And then by two ladies just walked up there with the provisional ballots, walking back into the precinct, and a bag of, like, the paper ballots. And I said to them, I go, what, you just can carry those around? And they said, no, the truck left them. But the truck's right here, so I'm not real sure what the hell's going on here. I don't think it's right. This guy has a BSO uniform. You can't see him, but I don't see a BSO car. This is the weirdest thing I've ever seen. Broward County, like, this shit is slack. I'm just like, I'm amazed at how slack this stuff is. I'm gonna take you over here. I don't know if you can see it because it's dark. But the ballots are right there, like right in the middle screen, and blue bags on the ground. Just in there. So we're just gonna film this. I know it's dark. This is the weirdest thing I've ever seen in my life. Like, do they seriously put this stuff in people's car and then let them bring it to the truck? Like, really? Look, this lady is bringing ballots out of her car. Like, bringing ballots out of her car from apparently this building, I don't know, I'm not real sure what's going on here. Unless these are people coming from other precincts. Sir, officer, are these people coming from other precincts? Is that what's happening? So they let them transport them with one person in the car from other precincts? Apparently so, huh? That doesn't seem right, does it? I know. But you know it doesn't. So apparently Broward County allows people to drive from other precincts by themselves. There's people with just one person in the car here. And they let them just drive over with the ballots, because you know.
So, YouTube, welcome back. You saw the video. I'm sorry for the poor quality. She was trying to take it with you know, in a hurry. But essentially, just to recap, and I broke this down to everybody on American Freedom Radio, but I'll break it down really quick again. What you witnessed was a volunteer having to actually go sneak around back, because when she asked the question, why were there a bunch of absentee ballots being unsecurely carried with the bag by itself, with one person and no one else with her, when they asked that question, they were told that the truck had already left, and therefore they were going to carry those ballots to the warehouse personally. But that turned out to be a lie, because as you saw in the video, there was an Enterprise truck right there. It didn't go anywhere, but that's what they were told, and that's why they snuck around back. And that's when, you know, they were kind of fiddling with the camera and didn't get it right. It was upside down, but it was still pretty clear what was happening. Now, what you saw in the video was a big deal, because those, if you can't tell, were people's personal vehicles. All those vehicles were being driven by one person, and there was no other person making sure that everybody's being held accountable, and making sure that those ballots are being tampered with. Now, it gets deeper, because every single one of those ballots that arrived in someone else's personal vehicle, unsecured, not locked up, those ballots were actually from other precincts, people. In other words, the ballots at that current precinct were mixed with the ballots from other precincts. That's illegal. The fact that the ballots were being carried by one person in one person's POV with no other observers around those individuals is illegal. Whenever these people were challenged on this, they would get defensive, they would get upset. Like I was just explaining earlier, whenever me and Suzanne were looking at this person take ballots off of the floor, like out of a specific group of ballots from a very specific machine, they were taking them and arbitrarily, at least seemingly so, arbitrarily stacking them separate into another pile. But the election fraud was rampant all over the country, people. This is why I get so frustrated when I hear people say blue no matter what and pretend like the Democratic Party is so much better than the Republican Party, and I get just as equally frustrated whenever the Republicans are perfectly fine with election fraud committed by their party, or the MAGA people are perfectly fine with election fraud that benefits their agenda, but call the Democrats the Demorats because they commit election fraud. I have a problem with the idea that anyone who is actively participating and benefiting in some way, form, or fashion from the duopoly is on your team if they're not talking about election fraud. And I find it hard to believe that your convictions lie in some moral altruism, like you actually are concerned about election fraud, if you're not calling out election fraud wherever you see it, rather than just calling out the election fraud that hurts your side. Now, I actually had Brenda Snipes called on me. Some lady pulled out a flip phone, people. Pulled out a flip phone to call Brenda Snipes on myself and Suzanne. She said, "Oh my God, Brenda, they won't leave. They're standing here and they're with Tim Canova. And I don't know what to do. They just won't leave. And should I call the cops? I'm going to call 911 if you guys don't leave." We're like, lady, it is not that big of a deal. But I made it very clear that her making it such a big deal out of us being there made me uncomfortable, and it made me believe that we needed to be there even more so. Now, Tim Canova 100% was cheated. I don't know how else to put it, people. I said the one benefit if Tim Canova loses out of this race, I said this a long time ago, that if he decided to go independent, we're going to see a phenomena that has never happened, because that's how rigged these elections are. And this is how confident they are that they can rig it openly without anyone saying anything or doing anything about it. I've said time and time again, anyone who's watched this channel knows, what do I always say about why it's very hard for me to believe that there is any opportunity for Bernie Sanders to win running as anything other than a Democrat as the system currently stands? Because I know for a fact that Jill Stein got more than 1.5 or 1.7% of the national vote during the general election. But do you think that the Democrats and the Republicans who are counting the ballots and who are oftentimes rigged the fucking system against third parties are actually going to count the ballots necessary for Jill to reach that 5% in order for the in order for the Green Party to get the federal funding that they desired, in order for the Green Party to be active and more like without having to seek a ballot access? They would get automatic access in many states if they would have reached 5%. There were a lot of benefits that would have otherwise tampered with the duopoly that these corrupt politicians are currently benefiting from. This was the perfect example, and I hate that Tim had to be essentially the sacrificial lamb in this regard, but it proved something. It proved that until we get ballot initiatives passed, we don't need to be discussing party politics like it's the solution to all of our problems, because supplementally, it is a solution. There should be a more progressive Democratic Party because it is the second most powerful party in the country, and therefore it cannot go unchecked. There should be a more moderate version of the Republican Party where they actually uphold the values that they're trying to claim that they portray, and it would be better for everybody if that was the case. That way we can get more bipartisan, hopefully for the good of the people, more bipartisan cooperation between both of the parties. And then we also should be building up the Green Party, because more people who have access to democracy and more people that have access to candidates that represent their ideology in the purest form, that is better for our democracy overall. We should have a stronger libertarian party as well. We should have a working families party that actually is putting forth candidates. We should, I believe in more democracy, not less. If you think that, I'm going to show you the numbers. This is Debbie Wasserman Schultz numbers for her general election in 2016. For those of you who don't know, I'll read it. For those of you who listen on the radio, I'll read it out loud to you. So Debbie Wasserman Schultz won 56.7% of the vote. Really quick, Anthony Reyes, thanks for the super chat. Saddest part is that with the police state we live in and the defunding of education, we can't revolt against these bastards. It does seem that way, but I'm inclined to disagree, only because I think that we're kind of on the precipice of something massive if there's some major change sometime in the very near future. So we're going to see. But essentially, Debbie Wasserman Schultz got 183,000 votes with 56.7% in 2016. Joe Kaufman, her Republican opponent, got 130,000 with finishing with 40% of the vote. And then Don Idris, who's an independent, and then Lyle Milstein, who's also independent, finished with 1.6 and 1.2% of the vote, respectively. Now, I think that we can all agree that over the last year or so, Debbie Wasserman Schultz's popularity has not only remained stagnant or moderately unpopular, she's abysmally unpopular. No one likes this woman, including the Democratic Party itself. She has been all but shunned in a lot of ways. and pretty much all of Hillary's personnel from 2016 has been shunned in a lot of ways, if you didn't know. But Debbie Wasserman Schultz is what Tim Canova accurately described as an albatross around the neck of the Democratic Party, and it is. And I don't see why anybody would want her in office other than to protect their own ass, and a lot of people speculate that's what it is. But I want to show you the results of this election. Debbie Wasserman Schultz, despite the fact her popularity decreased, despite the fact that Republicans all but swept most of the general elections in Florida, despite the fact that the early voting favored Republicans and independents over Democrats, specifically in Florida, not by a lot, but by about 4 or 5 percentage points. Despite the fact that Tim Canova, just in the primary election alone, last time he ran as a Democrat, actually won well over 20,000 votes, where Debbie Wasserman Schultz nearly beat him, quote unquote, by about 3,000 to 4,000 votes. Somehow, some way, by the end of this race, Debbie Wasserman Schultz actually ended up improving. And at the same time, Tim Canova actually lost tens of thousands of votes. How? Someone want to explain that to me? How did she go from 56% in the last race, growing more unpopular, while the Democratic Party simultaneously grew more unpopular, losing key Senate seats and obviously losing a lot of establishment seats as well? This is Florida. Bill Nelson just lost a seat that he has inhabited for literally like 2 to 3 decades to Rick Scott, who actually destroyed Florida, who had an active part in destroying Florida. And Rick Scott beat Bill Nelson because that is how much disdain people have for the Democratic Party. I was campaigning. There was no energy for Debbie Wasserman. On the ground for Tim Canova, there was no energy for Debbie Wasserman Schultz. I bullshit you not. I can't count how many times I heard "fuck that bitch." That's verbatim. That's not ad-libbing. This is a fact. And you can ask any Tim Canova volunteer. They don't like her. They wanted her out. There are people saying they would vote blue no matter who, unless that who was Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Tim Canova was by far the most popular candidate in all of the precincts in Broward County, people. But somehow, Tim Canova went from 22,000 votes in the primary election of 2016-2015 timeframe to 12,000 votes in a general election when his popularity actually grew even more, where he got confirmation from all the previous people that voted for him, and we're in a general election where roughly 200,000 votes were casted. How does the most popular candidate in the race, people, lose tens of thousands of votes, while the most unpopular candidate in the race in a state where Andrew Gillum got beat, Bill Nelson got beat, several Democratic candidates across the state got beat? It was a dominantly red election for Florida. But yet, somehow, some way, Debbie Wasserman Schultz manages to actually improve. I wonder if it has anything to do with those ballots that were being carted off from different precincts. I wonder if that is why the pollster that was harassing and heckling Suzanne and myself was so defensive. I wonder if that's why so many people were so hesitant to run as an independent in a dominantly blue or even a dominantly red area, because we literally saw something that has never happened before. We saw a person go from a registered Dem to an independent directly the year after he was neck and neck with a candidate, when his a poll that was conducted by Republicans, by the way, because they wanted to show how vulnerable Debbie Wasserman Schultz was in Florida, in that Broward County area, to the Republican candidate, to be beat by the Republican candidate, Joe Kaufman. And what it instead showed was that Tim Canova was in a dead heat with Debbie Wasserman Schultz, with 400 people questioned from all different types of demographics, and in a race that had only 200,000 people vote. How can we pretend that that poll was that far off? Why are we still using machines that can be so easily hacked? Why are we seeing such little accountability? And the reason I can answer that question for you. The reason why is because of people like Beto O'Rourke, who, when given that national platform, stays quiet because the establishment told him to. If you want to be honest. I'm glad. I have a lot of admiration for Stacey Abrams, because she said she will fight until every last vote is heard. Maria Estrada in California said there was voting irregularities all over Anthony Rendon's assembly district that she is running in. And she said she will fight to the bitter end. And Tim Canova is holding on to hope as well. I didn't bother him today because obviously he just needed a break, honestly. But tomorrow we're going to be going forward to figure out how we can fundraise. And I really sincerely hope that you all will help us fundraise to challenge this election, because I personally believe that Debbie Wasserman Schultz and Brenda Snipes are counting on Tim Canova to fold. They're hoping that he will not call her bluff. And this is just from what I experienced and what other people who are on the ground experience when interacting with Debbie Wasserman Schultz. She was desperate. Here's something that you all probably wouldn't have expected, but Debbie Wasserman Schultz was actually canvassing. She knocked on one of Tim Canova's supporters' doors trying to get her to vote for, or trying to get him to vote for her. She was knocking on doors. Remember the election before, she was so confident that the system was going to reward her and that no one was going to do anything about it. She didn't even bother campaigning. But she was campaigning. She was out shaking people's hands. She was chasing down literature from Tim Canova volunteers and calling them liars, saying that they were being deceptive, and it was obviously untrue. Tim Canova's literature is fact-checked, and we all know this. But she was desperate. Someone said that she was almost in tears. Almost in tears, because she simply did not know if she was going to win. She didn't know if it was a sure thing. Now, do you believe that would stop somebody from, I don't know, switching the voting results on the machines? Which isn't hard to do at all. If anybody can do it, it would be Debbie Wasserman Schultz's district. Now, is that the safest way to do it? Because now Tim Canova, thanks to him and his volunteers and being diligent, they took pictures of the final counts for all the ballots. So if the final count doesn't actually add up to the numbers that are being reported as far as the difference in the amounts of the votes, that discrepancy could allow Tim Canova to challenge it in court again and hopefully win in court again. But I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, because I just want to first just acknowledge this reality that even Andrew Gillum, who I can guarantee suffered from some ballot tampering, why would he not challenge DeSantis? Why, people? Think about that. He lost by 0.1%. That man was in striking distance. A recount could have changed everything. And he gave up. He didn't say, I'm going to stick through to make sure all the ballots are counted. I'm going to make sure that there was no machine tampering. I'm going to keep fighting. No. And in my personal opinion, I'm a little bit harsh. I get it. I'm a jagged edge when it comes to my standards for a functioning democracy. But you got to stick that out. You got to stick that through. but you gave up because you were told to, because you're not allowed to challenge election fraud. Now, I will say this. The Democrats took back the House, which was surprising to a lot of people, including, it wasn't that surprising to me. It was a little surprising, but it was the Senate that I was more so concerned with, because that would tell us a little bit more how so with House, the districts are so small that they can be swayed either way in a lot of cases. Now, obviously not in the case of Debbie Wasserman Schultz, but you know what I mean. But the Senate tells you how the state feels about your party. And I think that most people would agree with that. I think a lot of pollsters would agree with that. The Senate races, obviously there's a lot of money behind Senate races. We know this. But just the overall popularity of your party at the time amongst not only the people who are in your party, but the independents and some people who are kind of on the fence. That's a heat check for how popular. And the Democrats have fallen behind even more so in the Senate. And that's where your Supreme Court justices are going to be a crucial play for 2020. And we'll see if they cave again. And I'll give my predictions about what I think will happen. But I do want to first give credit where credit is due. And I think that you all, and I hope you all, would join me in actually congratulating our revolution on having such an outstanding election. I mean, it is I'll read some of the popular ones, of course. You all know. Tulsi Gabbard isn't our revolution candidate. Of course she won. Wide margin. Obviously Bernie Sanders is. But you also had Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. You also had Yan Omar, one of the two Muslim women to be the first Muslim women in the House of Representatives. You had, I already said Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I'm trying to find the other U.S. They had another one. Oh, Veronica Escobar from Texas for District 16. They had about, I want to say a good 10 to 11 people, I want to say. It was up there. So here's some ballot initiatives that they got passed. They got yes on Proposition 2 for medical marijuana in freaking Utah. Yes on Initiative 1639 for safe schools and safe communities in Washington. No on Missouri Proposition A, right to work referendum in Missouri. Yes on Ballot Initiative 101, yes for health care for Oregon. Yes on Proposal 3, Medicaid expansion in Utah, which is a big, they are in desperate need of Medicaid expansion in Utah. So that was our revolution proposition. Yes on Portland, Clean Energy Fund, an initiative for Oregon. Yes on Ballot 26-200, honest elections in Oregon. No on Measure 106 to ban public funds for abortion. So they got abortion rights protected in Oregon. They have done fantastic work. Yes on Amendment 1, a Clean Missouri amendment. Yes on Proposal 3, promote the vote in Michigan. Yes on Proposal 2, voters, not politicians, independent redistricting commission, So they're going to have no politicians that will be in charge of redistricting in Michigan. It'll actually be the voters doing it now. Yes on Amendment 2 for medical marijuana for Missouri. And it's for Veterans Health Care Service initiatives. So our revolution, you have to give credit where credit is due. I know that sometimes they don't actually get it right. They didn't get it right with Andrew Gillum. Like, I know it, you know it, we all know it. I don't think they got it right with Beto O'Rourke at all. I think that he's a pretty face that they put up front. Oh, and the big one, the very, very big one. Yes, on second chances. The Voting Restoration Amendment that gave 1.4 million felons their right to vote again. And that was passed overwhelmingly with bipartisan support from all sides. I cannot tell you how appreciative I am of our revolution and the efforts that they made, because this is something that you all know that I advocate for regularly. We can't talk about party politics until we start getting these initiatives passed. And they got, on top of the United States representatives, they got 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24, 28, 32, 36, 40, 44, 48, 56, 70? They got 70 candidates, 70 progressive candidates across the nation in various offices appointed. Now, this is a big victory for Bernie Sanders going in. Do you all? I said this, that the House, like Bernie was positioning himself for a 2020 run from the moment that he got done, and when he suspended the rules and endorsed Hillary Clinton, because he said that he would rather live to fight another day, and I totally get that. Didn't really like it. A lot of tears that night from everybody. Good guy. We did a lot of work that year, and I know that it wasn't for naught, because these ballot initiatives wouldn't be here without our revolution, and our revolution wouldn't even be here if Bernie Sanders didn't run. So let's be very clear that man deserves appreciation and deserves his own applause, just because he isn't the senator of Wyoming. He isn't the senator of Idaho or Michigan or Missouri or Oregon, places where these ballot initiatives, or Florida, places where these ballot initiatives were successful. But the organization that Bernie Sanders put together is responsible for it. So even as a U.S. Senator from Vermont, he has been efficacious in affecting progressive change across the nation. And that, in my opinion, deserves to be lauded and applauded. And anybody else who says otherwise is just a fucking hater at this point. You can be mad at some of the stuff that he says, but you can't be mad at his resolve, and you cannot be mad at his results. So our revolution got 70 candidates. That's a lot. And because of their success, they were able to have a direct hand in flipping the House of Representatives. But more so, you have key states that Bernie Sanders will need. Like, I think that now, no matter who runs against him, because Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has New York on her back at this point, Bernie Sanders will overwhelmingly, or even potentially Tulsi Gabbard, will overwhelmingly win, or both. Well, they'll overwhelmingly win New York in the 2020 primary, because Bernie Sanders started this organization that helped put together Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Just Democrats deserve some credit too, I guess, but I feel like they hurt her more than help her at this point. But this organization helped to prop up Ocasio-Cortez. Now you have voices and sponsors and endorsements behind some of this legislation that people like Tulsi Gabbard were trying to put through. Now Tulsi Gabbard isn't the only anti-war voice in Congress. You have 4 or 5 people that not only are anti-war, but because they are from the region of the Middle East, are going to have unique insight on the damage of the United States military-industrial complex. All of a sudden, the mandate of the progressive increases substantially because of what this organization has helped to put together. So I will say that although I am not a proponent personally of Dem Enter, like in and of itself, like I don't believe that you're going to change the Democratic Party totally, or you're going to even change the Green Party totally for that matter. Like, the party politics are flawed, but I am a proponent of affecting change however you can, whenever you can. And I am definitely a proponent of solution-based thinking and solutions like the ones that have been successful because of our revolution. So I'm just really excited about that. I really am. So when we get right down to it, the Democrats still they could have done more, right? They could have had Stacey Abrams win. Andrew Gillum could have won. There are people, Bill Nelson even though I don't like Bill Nelson could have won. And to be 100% honest about it, it is the Democrats' fault that some of their most popular candidates lost. But let's think about that. One second. How do your most popular candidates lose? The candidates that you threw out in front of everybody from the very beginning. Beto O'Rourke was the promised one from the very beginning. Andrew Gillum was the promised one from the very beginning. But you let Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez slip in, right? How did that happen? How did Veronica Escobar, who I've never seen on television in my life, get in? How did Jan Omar get in? Rashida Tlaib. How did they get in? But the candidates you've put millions and millions of dollars behind didn't get in. The ads were non-stop. You know why? And this is something that, unfortunately, I feel like we have to repeat it over and 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 over again. But we're going to say it again one more time, because apparently the people in the back didn't get the message. So it's okay. We're going to provide a refresher for you. If you run on single payer Medicare for all, if you run on a peacetime platform, if you run on $15 minimum wage, or even better yet, a livable wage, you will sweep every single race, with few exceptions, of course, but you'll win. How do we know? Because I saw Rashida Tlaib do it. How do we know? Because I saw Jan Omar, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Tulsi Gabbard remaining in power, Bernie Sanders proving how dominant his presence is in Vermont. I saw our revolution take people with no money, no political background, and push people into the House that are now some of the most popular candidates in the country. Not because of what they look like, not because of the money behind them, but because they spoke to the issues. They didn't dance around Medicare for all. They said, that's my goal. We're not successful until we achieve that. Not some version of that. Not an altered version of that like the Affordable Health Care Act, but Medicare for all or single payer health care. They will not be satisfied until everyone has a living wage. Not some version of that where it incrementally happens over time, but an absolute living wage. They ran on policy. Beto O'Rourke ran on being pretty. Andrew Gillum ran on being black and not being racist. Andrew Gillum allowed his campaign to be poisoned by the touch of death. He got the touch of death from Hillary, got the kiss of death from Debbie Wasserman Schultz. You can't pretend to be progressive anymore. And it's funny because I would still consider Linda Sarsour a friend. I disagree with her often, but I still consider her a friend. But she finally woke up. She said, you can't win races anymore not being all the way progressive. You can't. Beto O'Rourke could have won. Andrew Gillum could have won, but they pivoted, and everyone was watching. And then Andrew Gillum had a double whammy, because the moment he decided that it was okay to appear with Hillary Clinton, the moment that he decided that it was okay to appear with Debbie Wasserman Schultz, I'm her brother from another mother. Look at my yarmulke. I'm Jewish now. Mazel tov. The moment that you actually energized the red state. You single-handedly turned the purple state red because they were scared, not necessarily of you, but mostly of the idea that if these are the women that you're going to have behind you, then you are going to be possibly, in the minds of the red people, worse than Rick Scott. You're going to be worse than him. There are some people who might not have voted for him or might have voted for him. But there are a lot of people who made the decision that they were never going to vote for him or support him in any capacity the moment that he decided that he was going to have Hillary Clinton conduct a private fundraiser for him. And that moment he decided he was going to go to the temple, to the synagogue, to have Debbie Wasserman Schultz pretty much lick his boots. Or first, vice versa, I should say. The Trump effect is real. And the sooner that progressives and Democrats realize this, the sooner you'll be able to win races. It's not a hard formula. No, you're not going to win every race. But you have, like, Rashida Tlaib beat a Democrat in a primary race. It was indeed an establishment Democrat. Look at what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez did to who was presumably going to be the Speaker of the House. And not only now, we get to see what happens next, because I fully expect, Rashida Tlaib, our revolution candidate, she represents Michigan for the U.S. House District 13 in Michigan. I don't know if you all saw that interview, but she made it very clear that she was not going to be supporting Nancy Pelosi. I am hoping that we are poised to hear Jan Omar Deb Hyland from New Mexico. I hope that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez will get back on the boat. And then even Veronica Escobar from Texas. I hope that they all stand up boldly and proudly and say, we are progressives. She does not represent our state. She does not represent our district. She does not represent the people who have elected us. And therefore, they will not support her. Will that stop her from getting elected? No. But these little litmus tests along the way give us insight into what these candidates are about. And these will not be the last progressive candidates to be elected to Congress. And these will not be the last progressive candidates to be elected to the Senate. There will be more. And their presence will grow. And over time, the more they show us that they have the conviction of a progressive, that they have the conviction of the people's wishes, rather than the convictions of the donors' wishes or the desire to want to hold office more than they want to help the people, we will start to see some major change. We had a temporary setback with the Trump administration, I will admit. But it started because of the Democrats not having a progressive presence outside of really Bernie Sanders, and then eventually Tulsi Gabbard, and then Nina Turner. And now we see a lot of people trickling out of the woodwork, but I believe that number will grow. And I'm okay with that. I want to see the Green Party grow. But I don't know if the Democrats are going to heed this lesson to be learned, because there wasn't a blue wave yesterday. Their definition of a blue wave is it's the resistance. That's their definition of the blue wave. But these candidates that I just listed off of Our Revolution's website that helped put them over the top. There were some others that helped put them over the top too, but these people who helped put them over the top, they don't have a super majority, but they have a basic majority. These are not resistance folks. These are not the people that they had in mind when they discussed the blue wave. These people have their own wave that they're riding, and I hope that it stays like that. But when you have an increased presence in the House, or excuse me, in the Senate of Republicans, when you have even some of those Senate candidates winning not because of their own merits, but because Donald Trump is still so popular in their states, it is time for you to stop pussyfooting around and get down to the issues. Can we all agree with that? Everybody would be happier. If the Democrats got down to the issues, there's a trickle-down effect that happens. If you address election fraud and election integrity, you can't address it halfway. You have to address it in its totality. Therefore, you will start to see more ballot access. You will start to see ranked choice voting. You will start to see candidates getting their fair shake in a way that partially benefits the Democrats by being on the cutting edge of dealing with these issues. But it's not going to come from neoliberals. I just want to be clear about that. But if they want to keep their offices, if they want to keep their donors, if they want to keep the House like they have, if they want to win in 2020, we're going to start seeing some interesting changes, and I can't wait to see how things develop going forward. I do want to give a special shout out to the Julian Assange family. I've heard, I know they're live right now, so definitely go check them out. I have prior engagements, so I couldn't be a part of it. But I will be a part of it next month. I feel bad because it's the second month in a row that I missed it, and I really feel bad. But it was an insane week for me. So obviously I'm exhausted, slept most of the day, then had to go take care of personal matters. So it was obviously a much harder week for Julian, and so I want to give us always, as always, the biggest shout out that I can possibly give, from one journalist to another, from one activist to another, from one truther to another. Make sure you go check out Susie Dawson's page. Make sure you go check out the WikiLeaks Twitter, and they'll be updating with the Julian Assange live stream, the Unity for J live stream. So if you have not yet, make sure you go do that. Outside of that, people, we want to have some big news coming sooner rather than later. Whoever's in the group chat, don't say anything because I know you all already know, but we don't want the crowd to know yet. But if you want to find out how big the news is, you got to make sure that you click that subscribe button. Make sure that you donate to us at Patreon, www.patreon.com/mikasesukasa, like I said. And really quick, I will address, we have about 5 minutes left, 5 to 6 minutes left. So really quick, I will go ahead and address any questions that you all have for me about the Tim Canova race. If any questions you have for me about, the opinion, or my opinion about what took place, I can give you a pretty quick assessment of that. It was rigged. It was upsetting. It was frustrating. Jesus Perez, Julian is probably the best journalist of our generation, and all fake news wants him killed or captured by the CIA. I would say that that's a pretty damn fair assessment, Jesus. I think that he is up there. So with that being said, people, thank you all so much for tuning in. And always remember, more than anything else, find your balance. Peace.